The Ladder and the Mask, an original short story written and narrated by Knife Point. I stepped carefully to not disturb the trash accumulating along the edges of the crumbling steps, descending slowly and deliberately. The paint on the walls had long since flaked away, leaving the concrete coated with countless layers of grime and graffiti scrawled in the local script. A mess of barely decipherable glyphs, symbols, and drawings all created a riotous visual noise like the deliberations of madmen across the ages. The stairs were illuminated by a singular window, high up at the top of the stairwell, highlighting a school of dust motes swimming in the stale air. The abandoned apartment complex smelled of mildewing cement, and echoes traveled through its rusted piping like foul water. As I rounded the last flight of stairs, my eyes fell upon a dry-rotted wooden door standing just out of the light's reach. The basement, and it was padlocked shut. The door's gnarled surface was stained with more graffiti than the walls. In the center of the chaotic scribblings was a black rectangle resembling an open doorway. Floating in the center of the shape was a yellow face, a sickly yellow face, with 2 black slits for eyes. I cut the rusty lock off the door, and it clattered loudly to the debris-covered floor. The rotting door flexed and creaked as I pulled it open, pushing the trash into a pile at its base. A smile broke across my lips. The artifact no doubt lies in wait within the basement. My employer would be most pleased when I returned with his prize. Being a wealthy collector of oddities and occult artifacts, my employer promised an elevated reward for this object's retrieval, considering the danger. I hoped that the reward would indeed be worth the trouble, as this building was about as easy to find as a cryptid. The locals spoke only of it in whispers, and all my questioning was met with hissed curses and suspicious glances. The entire district of this city stood abandoned for many years, with only wild animals and vagrants daring to wander back in. From what I could tell, it was forgotten intentionally, like a secret repressed deep into the corner of the mind. The smell of mold rolled out from the open basement like a wet cloud. Coughing, I produced a flashlight from my pack and shined the beam inside, then paused. Strangely, the beam did not break through the intense shadows, as if it were extinguished after crossing the basement threshold. I stepped forward cautiously with the flashlight clutched in my right hand, my left reaching out hesitatingly toward the dark opening. My hand passed through the plane, disappearing into shadow and emerging again as I retracted it. Odd. My smile faded and was replaced with nervousness. I stuffed the flashlight back into my bag and produced a candle and matchbox. The exact logic of this I was unsure of, but something in my racing mind told me that a flame may have a better chance of cutting through this darkness. Waving the match out, I held the lit candle in the open doorway. The flame burned tall and straight in the still room. Through the haze of dust particles in the air, the interior of the basement came into view, revealing a tight square cinder block room packed with debris, old crates, mildewing boxes, and rusting appliances. Stepping inside, my breath quickened with excitement, then abruptly descended into stomach-churning nausea when the light fell upon a heavy, reinforced metal door on the far wall. It stood ajar, revealing a sliver of void blackness waiting from behind, pleading for my approach. This interior room could have been no more than the size of a broom closet, but all my instincts screamed for me to run. Something was not right about this place. I turned away from the metal door and back to my surroundings, assuring myself that whatever was in that room was better left unseen. I only wanted to find this object and get out as quickly as possible. Straining against the oppressive darkness, tucked away in the back left corner of the room, I spied out my prize. A wooden ladder. It looked ordinary, old and splintering, and about 6 feet tall. The thing seemed simply banal. It wasn't until closer inspection with the candle that I found its rungs bore strange rune-like and cryptic symbols etched into the wood, the meanings of which were unknown to me, but they seemed to be leading up the frame of the ladder and drawing the eye upwards towards the top rung. It was a thing of urban legend. It supposedly had the power to transport one to a higher plane of existence, according to one story, or the power to bring one to new levels of understanding. Whatever it may be, my employer wanted it, but more than that, I wanted to leave the basement. My heart was racing. I snuck a glance over my shoulder at the interior room with its ominous metal door to reassure myself that I was not being watched. Drew a breath, then blew out my candle. Immediately, I was plunged into unrelenting darkness. My eyes opened wide to catch any drop of light as I grabbed the ladder blindly with both hands, hoisting it in its upright position. It felt as if some great, lurking predator were watching me from within the darkness. I moved with a suppressed panic toward the stairwell door, trying my best to not trip over debris and drop the ladder. The doorway to the stairwell stood as a bright, glowing rectangle, but somehow allowed no light into the basement. My heart froze in my chest as I kicked something small in the blackness, sending it scraping loudly across the floor. For a second I stood frozen, expecting to hear something in the space with me. A reaction, shuffling debris, a second set of lungs, anything. But nothing stirred. With an exhale, I glanced down to see what I had kicked, but the breath caught in my chest. Looking up at me from the ground was a small, yellow mask. It glowed with a soft golden light and was the only thing visible within the dark room at all, as if it produced light from within itself. It bore no expression, no markings, and no features other than 2 dead slits for eyes. I felt 1,000 urges to pick it up. Absolutely not. Never in my life had I felt more terrified or compelled by anything. Never in my career had I encountered an object emitting so much malicious energy. It beckoned me to dash the ladder to the floor, to snatch the mask up feverishly, to cradle it. The attraction from it was undeniably the source of the darkness phenomenon in the basement. It was drawing the light out of the room and into itself. I flew out of the basement, flung the ladder towards the stairs with a clatter, and yanked the wooden door shut. On the other side of the door, the mask pulsed lightly in the dark. At the instant the basement door was shut, the stairwell lightened noticeably. With my back against the door, I tried to calm my pounding heart, assuring myself that the mask would stay in that dreadful basement. The ladder was mine, and it was time to leave. I tightened the straps of my backpack, held the ladder under one arm, which thankfully sustained no damage, and began ascending the crumbling stairs. 1 flight, 2 flights, 3, 4, 5, 6... There weren't this many flights of stairs when I descended, were there? The light from the window at the top of the stairwell seemed to dim. 7 flights, 8, 9. The stairs were growing steeper. I had to lift my knees almost to my chest to climb each step. The stairwell was darkening, but the sun could not have been setting outside this early. 10 flights, 11, 12. Somehow, the height between the overhead flight and the underfoot flight was shrinking. I had to stoop with the ladder to continue. 13 flights, 14, 15. It was becoming too dark to see. The light from the window seemed impossibly far up. I had to shimmy on my side with one elbow under me, hauling the ladder on my shoulder up the stairs. I must have climbed 20 flights when the angle of ascent became too sharp to maneuver the ladder around the landing. I spat into the trash along the railing and cursed. What was happening? Was this some strange property of this damned ladder? Was it employing some inexplicable reality-bending effect on the stairway? My mind was racing with confusion and anxiety. I removed my bag and reached in for my flashlight. It was gone. My hand pressed against something warm and smooth in the bag. I pulled it out and stared at the repulsive yellow face in my hands. My blood turned cold as the 2 eye holes stared blankly back at me, like a child peering up innocently at his parents' horrified expressions after accidentally killing a pet, not understanding the wrong they have done. My arms went numb as I held the mask in the darkness. How had it gotten in my bag? My mind flashed back to the basement, and I realized that my only hope for escape is to return both artifacts. I stuffed the mask back into my bag and began the descent, my hips slamming into each step as I propelled myself roughly down the narrow crevice of the stairs, dragging the ladder behind me. The stairway was nearly pitch black by then, and I knew it to be the mask drawing in the light from the stairwell and leaving darkness. Finally, I reached the bottom landing and saw that there was warm light pouring out of the open basement. I had closed the door, right? Breathing heavily, I approached the basement and looked in. Suddenly, All my fears seemed to subside. I felt a calm summer breeze whisper past my hair. I could hear birds singing. The smell of flowers, blooming trees wafted out, and warm sunlight filled the once dark basement with glorious golden radiance. But there were no windows. How could there be sunlight in the cellar? Almost all my senses told me that this was the ground floor of some beautiful country home in the summer, but the illuminated cinder block room before me assured me that I was still in the dank basement of a long abandoned apartment block. Could the absence of the light-sucking mask in this room be causing this? I walked the ladder back to its corner in a daze, taking in the sensations of summer about me. I peered into my bag, but the mask was not there. I was sure that I had not dropped it. The radiant light began to grow, unbearably luminous. The beautiful bird song reached a crescendo and climbed to a grating screech. The warm sun rays began to feel scorching. The noise was ringing in my ears and drowning out my thoughts. The heat was searing my pale flesh, and the light was blinding me. I twisted my head about, trying to find where I had dropped the mask. I stopped when my manic gaze fell upon the unlatched metal door of the black interior room. It was so dark and inviting. The shadows promised to keep me safe from the blinding lights, from the screeching of living beasts, from the unbearable heat, from the pain of existence. I fell to my knees and began crawling towards the open doorway, writhing from being exposed to the light and dry heaving. As I reached the heavy metal door, a thought surfaced through all the noise from deep within. From deep within a mind that loved exploration, that studied cultures of the past, that found itself in troubled times and relied on cunningness, that was forced to take jobs from unkind people, breaking into places to steal treasures of this world. I was wearing the mask. I could see it now. The eye holes around my field of vision. Yes, the smooth, warm metal against my cheeks. The mask made its way onto me. I found the edges with my fingers and began to pry the mask away from my face. The skin stretched and pulled away from my stinging face like hot tar clinging to stone. With a great jolt, the mask tore away from my face, and I stood there in the dark basement, ears ringing from the silence around me, and my throat raw from screaming. The yellow mask only looked back at me with its empty expression. I flung the thing with fear and disgust into the interior room of the basement beyond that metal door. It clattered loudly within, and straining, I shut the heavy door and bolted it from the outside. The basement was filling with light from the stairwell, and I realized the effect of the mask was no longer influencing the basement. I shot out of the doorway and slammed the wooden basement door behind me. The ladder and that wretched mask should have stayed there. To hell with the reward, and to hell with my employer. I reached up with trembling hands and felt my face. I felt fleshy skin, smooth and unmarked. No mask. I climbed the stairs slowly with numb carelessness. 4 flights, and I found myself back at the ground level of the abandoned apartment building. I exited the building to the cool, crisp autumn air of late October.